The Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We'll move then to agenda item number 2, which is to consider approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig to approve the agenda that we have tonight. Any discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. So that motion does pass. Agenda item number 3. Agenda item number 3 is recognition of Mark Claith for his 31 years of service on the Marshall Fire Department, including 19 years as chief. I'll ask Director of Public Safety Rob Yant to come forward, as well as Chief Mark Claith. There was a reception and recognition for Chief Claith last week at the fire department. This is the formal recognition of Mark's service for many years. His leadership to the department is many, many contributions, and for that we're truly proud. I'm going to come around and Sharon, if you want to say anything, and then I have a presentation for Mark, and then we'll allow Mark to make any comments, as well as introduce his family, as well as other support that's here. So that's your.
Mr. Mayor, as you walk towards Mark, I just want to say thank you to Mark Claith. I've really appreciated your support and mentorship the short time I've been here. But just today, I was talking to the spouse of a former fire chief, and she commented what a big job the fire chief position is, and just such a fantastic job that you've done with the community. And I know that word community is something that you say often, and it really sticks in my mind, and I know for the council as well, as we go forward when we make decisions or bring things forward for the city to consider, is we always have to think about the greater good of the community. So I always appreciated you bringing that kind of perspective to us, and I'm going to miss that for sure. And so just want to thank you for your service again, and your great mentorship to me and the city council, and then of course your fire department as well.
Thank you. So this plaque does read, Chief Mark Claith, and grateful appreciation for your 31 years of service to the Marshall Fire Department, its members, and the community it serves. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, first of all, I want to thank my family. One son is missing today. He's still working for the county, so we'd like him to work. He's got to go to college, so I appreciate it. But my wife, Missy, is here. My oldest son, Brock, and my other son, Austin, are here. So if it wasn't for their support, I wouldn't have been able to do that job that I did. And I appreciate all the time that they gave it to me to allow me to do that. And I see some of the members of the fire department are here. They know they're part of my family. They will always be a part of my family. And I thank you so much to just give that opportunity to become a part of your families too. And I want to thank the council and Rob and this community. Like I said, we are very fortunate. I've had an opportunity to serve this community for 31 years, and I'm proud of Marshall. And I will always be proud of Marshall. And I will continue to fight for that proudness in this community. We have great things that we have to look forward to. We have a community that is willing to strive and to move forward. I've raised my kids here, and I'm still proud to call this home. And I was raised here. So again, Sharon made the comment, we have a great community. Let's keep building on it. We have opportunity with the younger generation. Let's get them involved, get a part of this thing, because we can make Marshall a great place. So again, thank you to all of you people.
Thank you, Mark.
The good thing is I don't have to stay now.
But you're always welcome.
Actually, we added you to the end of the agenda.
Agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4, consider the approval of the minutes of the special council meeting that was held May 22nd, as well as the regular council meeting that was also held on May 22nd, as well as the special council meeting that was held on May 29th. The council does have the minutes of those 3 meetings. Are there any corrections?
I recommend approval of the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Steve to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5 is to consider the Bituminous chip sealing project. We have a resolution before us that would accept the bid and award the contract. I'm calling Glenn Olson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer, to speak to this agenda.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We also included a map to show you where we intend to do the chip sealing work this year. It's a combination of projects that have been previously completed that now need a chip seal. As you know, we probably don't have a program that fully takes into account all the areas that are necessary, but in accordance with the budget, we would like to be able to spend up to the amount budgeted for chip seals. We recommend approval of the contract not to exceed the amount budgeted.
Questions for Glenn?
I move approval.
Motion by Craig. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 6. Agenda item number 6 is the Michigan Road Superior Road Reconstruction Project. We have 2 actions before us. One is to consider the resolution that would declare the official intent regarding the reimbursement of the expenditures, and then following that would be the resolution that would accept the bid and award the contract. So once again, Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We did receive 2 bids for this, and our estimate was right in the middle of the 2. The low responsible bidder was D&G Excavating from Marshall, and we would recommend award to that company.
Questions?
The only question I have, Glenn, this is a project that was requested by the folks out there, correct?
We worked with them. It was kind of a combination. We identified it, and then we met with the property owners that they did request the replacement of the roads.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, the first action would be the first resolution declaring the intent regarding the reimbursement of the expenditures.
Move to approve.
Motion by Steve,
Second.
seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. And then the second resolution would be the resolution that would accept the bid and award the contract and enter into the agreement with D&G Excavating in the amount of $1,022,427.60. Questions about that resolution?
I move the resolution.
Motion by Craig. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Glenn. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll note Councilmember DeCramer abstained. Agenda item number 7 is the consent agenda. We'll bring the items on the consent agenda up on the screen. So they include, consider the resolution authorizing the transfer of funds from Fund 260 to debt service funds 368 and 370. Consider the approval of 2019 regular city council dates, time, and location. Consider a resolution authorizing the closure of capital project 458. Consider the approval of the bills and project payments. Consider the approval of a transient merchant license for Julia Politsaba, Southwestern Advantage, and to declare equipment surplus property from the Parks Department. Is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
12. 12.
Any other item? If not, Kyle, I'll allow you to change. So you have the remaining items on the consent agenda, which are 8 through 12.
Move to approve consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 13, which was agenda item number 12. Jim?
I gotta refresh my memory here, but what is the actual license fee for this? I know that we reduced it last year, and just kind of looking for the refresher on this.
Yep, so the typical license fee for a transient merchant license is $315. So I just took what council did last year for the same the same purpose, same company, everything, just a different individual, and that was $31.50 is what council decided. So, but the fee can, if council so can set it to whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Jim,
Second.
seconded by Craig. Discussion? If no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 14. Agenda item number 14 is a presentation by the Lyon County Historical Society Museum. So with us tonight are the representatives from the museum, Lyon County Historical Society.
We do have handouts. I believe most of this was sent to you already. This is the latest that we have here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Andrews, Executive Director of the Lyon County Historical Society.
Andrea Hess, President of the Board. And with us tonight, we also have John Marshall, who is our Treasurer, and Neil Engelbrechtson, who is our Vice President as well. Well, we just wanted to say thank you for having us tonight, and we kind of wanted to walk through what's been taking place. Over the years, we've been coming here and letting you know our progress, starting with that 5-year strategic plan that we've been doing. It's now come to that point where we have finalized everything through succession of all the grants and the hard work between the board and what Jennifer has been able to do. And so this is the final step of being able to go up to the second floor and do actual creation and the exhibit plan. It'd be the finalization. So in front of you is the final drawing of the plan. It also talks about the funding that's going to requirement to put that exhibit in place, how much we already have committed, and then also what we need to plan to get to that final stage.
To go back a little bit on the process of how we got to this point, in 2015, we reached out to David Gerbitsky, who was the local history services manager at the Minnesota Historical Society, to ask them what is the process for getting a interactive, hands-on exhibit gallery on the second floor of the museum. At this point, we had the first floor completed, we had the basement completed, but the second floor, we were really looking to include more audio, more video, more interactives, things in exhibit galleries that do cost more money. So we knew that we need to pursue legacy grants. So in 2015, he suggested we start with an interpretive plan. We got a grant to conduct that project of the interpretive plan. We also got a grant to do a lighting evaluation and redesign plan. Those two led into research, which we got a grant in 2016. And then in 2017, we got a legacy grant for the exhibit plan. The exhibit plan, the final version, is what you have before you. The exhibit plan led into script writing, which is more of what will be on the actual signage itself. And then our goal this year is to apply for a large legacy grant, which would be for implementation of this exhibit plan. Legacy grants, they're small grants that are offered 4 times a year, and all of these projects leading up to this point were done with small grants. Implementation, of course, is the actual fabrication and construction of the exhibit gallery, so that will be a large grant. And large legacy grants are offered once a year. This year, May was the preliminary application deadline, so we submitted our pre-application, and then July 20th is the final application deadline. The numbers that are in that packet, we are looking at a $450,000 exhibit gallery, plus about $64,000 in lighting, so about $507,000. That is a lot of money to ask for legacy funding. So we are doing what we can to raise as much of a local match on top of that $507, so we can bring that number down of what we request from the state for legacy funding. Lyon County has committed $50,000 towards this. Last week we went before the Cottonwood City Council. They have committed $2,500 for this project. And we have about $30,000 of capital funding that's in the Historical Society that we are putting towards a match on this. We are going out to other cities in Lyon County, and we are going out to businesses in Lyon County to seek more of a match to put on this, along with our members and fundraisers.
So tonight, as we come before you, what we're looking for is a percentage of a match to what the Lyon County did. Now, they've contributed $50,000, and what we're coming before you and asking for is between 25 to 26. The 25 is a true 50%, but then the up to the 26 would be based on the population of Lyon County, which is how we're presenting to the other city councils. So when we went to Cottonwood, for example, we had recommended around 2,300. We presented at Ballatin last night. We're going to get tomorrow. Those are the things that we're looking at, is the percentage of their population within Lyon County. And that's how we're coming up with that dollar amount. So that is our request for this evening.
And this request, what we need for this legacy grant is a commitment before July 20th. We don't necessarily need the funds until after we get this grant. July 20th is the deadline. We will find out at the end of this year if we got the legacy funding, and then work on implementation would start in 2019. So this request would be basically for budget of 2019. We will be coming back here in about a month or so for our regular annual funding too. So we wanted to make you aware of that also.
So just to clarify that, and thank you for bringing that up. So,
Yes.
so you're looking for a commitment by towards the end of July, between now and the end of July, but it would actually be contingent on the legacy fund grant being awarded, and
Yes.
then our match would really come out of our 2019 budget.
Correct. And if for some reason we are not awarded that funding in December, we would want to try again, so there's a potential it could fall into 2020 budget, so.
Does anyone have any questions for us?
Questions?
Mr. Mayor, this is something, if we go along, this could come out, if not out of the general fund, it could possibly come out of our legacy.
That would be a funding possibility out of what Craig is referring to is our Capstone Endowment Fund, which is the fund that was set up with some of the proceeds from the transfer of ownership from the hospital. And so set up as a endowment, we can expend the interest off of there. The majority of the interest is allocated towards the payment of the bonds on the library, children's edition. But there is other funds that would be available. So Craig is correct, that would be one possibility. We did not budget anything out of that for 2018 calendar year.
You have 3 different exhibit possibilities here then, ranging from 250,000 to 455,000. So it all depends on how much funding you're going to get or how much of a grant.
We are aiming for the high. The wide range in the price there is due to the technology. In the very beginning, my board envisioned having lots of audio, video, and interactives because that's really driving museums towards that direction of hands-on, being able to participate. And then with this technology, incorporating STEM into it too and making it very educational. So we are aiming towards that 450 range because we want that technology in this exhibit gallery. That was one of our main reasons for pursuing the legacy grants and working with consultants is because I'm not a specialist in technology. You know, I can design exhibits and I can do a lot of it, but I can't, you know, write the programming for like an audio video. So that's why we really need legacy funding to help us with that. By bringing in those professionals, I can do that.
And yes, from a board's perspective, yes, we pushed Jennifer to go for the largest. With the audiovisual hands-on, we wanted to see it be a big wow factor on that second floor.
As far as the decision by the council, you need it before July 20th, but
A commitment, yes.
before then. So we don't have to act on it tonight. We can think about it and look for funding sources.
Yep.
Correct.
Absolutely.
I want to circle back to Craig's point. Your question was on the capstone endowment, and the other part of your question that you didn't ask is how much is available. There is $31,000 that would be available currently, and of course, by 2019, that number will grow somewhat.
Is that an appropriate use? I know it's for things that normally, I mean, it would kind of be above and beyond what we would normally do.
Typically, and there is some criteria, but typically the items that are funded out of our capstone and good example was our contribution to the traveling wall when it came to things that are one time, typically out of the ordinary, that typically are not part of our general levy. So,
Okay.
Steve?
What is the annual patronage of the museum?
I would say probably around 5,000 right now. And I really believe that once we get the second floor open, that number is going to increase substantially. Yeah, because right now we're kind of offering them just 2 levels of a 3-story museum. We have had traveling exhibits in there, and that has brought in a lot of visitors too, but we are really gearing this exhibit gallery towards families and making it intergenerational, so a wide audience.
Any other questions? Does the council need additional time to consider this? Is the council interested in making a commitment this evening with the identification of the funding source, either through our budgeting process for 2019?
I think that our continued support with the library and the contributions that it makes to the community, I think this is something very positive that we need to be behind. And I would make a motion that we support the library to be, if it takes to do $25,000, that we would promise to help them with this and, you know, to go for the legacy grant.
Motion by Craig, is there a second?
I guess I would like to second that, but I'd like to also have a good, clear vision where we're going to come up with that money. So I think with my mind, I would like.
Let me, before you get into the discussion, is there a second or not?
Say no.
Is there a second to that motion? For sake of discussion, I will second the motion. Now we're in discussion.
All right.
Go ahead,
I
John.
guess I would like to, I'm very much in favor of the project, but I'd like to know where we're getting the money from and, you know, what funds. So I guess I would like to see this come back to us in 2 weeks and have a plan of where we're going to get the money from. But, you know, again, I'm very much in favor of it. I'd like to see it done. But, you know, to just commit to that $25,000 now without knowing just where.
Sure.
Sharon, you got to come in, then Jim.
I'm not trying to push you to make a decision in any way, shape, or form, but we do have the draft financial audit from 2017. We had a year where we will be putting funds into the general fund as a result of underspending and some revenue exceeding expectations. And we're anticipating about $450,000 being put into the general fund. And just for the record, when you're talking a $12 to $14 million budget, it's a very small room for error. It sounds like a lot, but it's pretty close budgeting when you look at that size of a budget. And I'm not talking about all the proprietary funds there either, just the general fund. So I just put that forward to you that we did have some unanticipated surplus for the end of 2017.
I agree with John. I mean, I think it's a good project. I think we need to have where the money's coming from. And I've said that all along, that we should be more, in tune to where it's coming from. I understand we have money coming in, but have a source. If the capstone, I'm not familiar with that. I don't think we've tapped it since I've been on the council, so I would like to see more information on that. And I do support it. It's just that I want to be able to answer to our taxpayers, this isn't going to affect your levy, this is where it's coming from, and I don't have that information tonight.
Perhaps a motion to table until our next
Regular
I would
council.
make a motion to table to next, but do we got to remove your motion first?
Motion to table.
I motion to table it.
I'd second that motion.
Kyle, you have that?
Was the motion for the library or the museum?
Museum,
Discussion is about the museum, yes.
the museum.
The,
You said
mo-
library.
Well, I meant the museum.
That's what I thought.
It
the
happens a
motion
lot.
on the table is to table. Discussion on the motion to table.
I would just say this, that I agree. I like the idea of waiting and checking out things before we make a decision. There is close to 31,000, did you say, or something? But are there other uses that we want to make of some of that money? And so I think it's worthwhile thinking about it for a couple of weeks and then making a decision. And we should also maybe investigate, are there other uses of that legacy endowment money and that we want to use it for? So I think 2 weeks would be a good time to wait and then gather some information and then make a decision.
Any other discussion on the motion to the table? If not, you have that substitute motion now in front of you. We will move to a vote. That motion does pass, so this will be on the agenda, it's on the table for our next regular
Well,
council.
thank you very much for having us tonight.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Agenda item number 15. Agenda item number 15, consider the request of Prairie Home Hospice to host Light Up the Night event at Independence Park. Sharon, do you want to introduce this? And then with us tonight are Pat Valentine representing Prairie Home Hospice.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do have the Executive Director of Prairie Home Hospice, Pat Valentine, and also the Marketing Director, Tara Plant, who will present information on Light Up the Night and for your consideration, location of their event this year.
So welcome, Pat.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and talk with you tonight. We have talked a bit with Sharon and with Scott and Preston about our Light Up the Nights event. I don't know how many of you got to see our Light Up the Night event last year. We're really excited about it. A little bit of history. We decided that we wanted to look at another potential event that we would host in the community. About 17% of our budget comes from fundraising. It's why we are able to do what we do as a small nonprofit organization that is really grassroots and owned by the community and has been from day one. And so when we looked at different options, we wanted to find something that would not only have the potential to be a fundraiser for us in the long run and help us meet that kind of 17% goal, but also one that would benefit the community. And as you kind of look at through our outline, you'll see many, many times that this is also about the community. On the fundraising side of it, a lot of people will say, well, you know, you have been successful. We have another annual event in your fundraising. Why do you have to raise more? And the answer to that is the people who need our services, most of the population we serve is an older population. A great percent, 82% I think, is 60 years and older. And that population in our community is growing and will continue to grow. If we want to continue to meet that need and provide the kind of services that we provide over the next 15 or 20 years, we feel we have to maintain that 17% of our budget to support those services. Today, I've been with the organization for 6 years. 6 years ago, our budget was $1 million. Today, it's just over $2 million. So that 17% becomes a lot bigger number. And so in looking for another event to sponsor that would help generate those funds over the next few years, we came upon the Light Up the Night for two reasons. One, we think it has the potential to be a successful fundraiser over time, but also we're really excited that it has the potential to benefit our community, a community that has really supported us for many, many years. So we set out a couple of goals that we wanted to meet in doing it the first year. Kind of, you know, what's the criteria we were looking for long-term success. And that was the ability, number one, the ability to attract community support for the event based on the common belief that the event would benefit the entire community by drawing people into our community during the holiday season. Number two was, would it have the ability to attract people from across the region and our community? And number three, the degree to which those who attend would donate. So during our first year, that's what we really looked at. What is the potential here based on our first year? And on the right side of the outline in your packet, you can kind of see our evaluation after the first year. Really, we exceeded our expectations in year one in all areas. We were really pleased with the number of businesses and organizations that participated. We were just really amazed, honestly. It just far exceeded what we thought. We thought we would have to go out and sell the concept that if we hold this event, people will come. And we didn't have to sell very hard. I think the community believed along with us that that would happen. So the number of businesses and organizations that supported us in a number of ways really exceeded our expectations. We were happy with the number of volunteers that also exceeded expectations. Over 300 people participated as a volunteer in one way or the other, all ages, a number of different groups within the community. So it was exciting to see those groups come together in the community. Many of the groups that we worked with were partnering for the first time, and so we think that's good for our community. And we just received a lot of positive feedback from the community. And I think people, based on our first year, really do believe that. I think we exceeded our expectations in terms of, we brought Tara on with about 4 months and said, by the way, can you plan this event for us? We've got 4 months to plan it. We want to bring together a whole community. So we were really pleased with the results given the short amount of time that we had last year to prepare for the event. We estimate over 7,000 people attended the event. A large percent of those were from our immediate community, but we know that we drew people from a large area. I think primarily from the community. We had people talking about coming from Ballatin and Pipestone and Curry and Slayton and Tracy, but we also had people from as far away as Mankato and Duluth and Wilmer that said, well, they heard we had one, and they thought they'd drive down and see it. So people really will drive a long distance to see something different. So we were, like I said, very happy with the results in many ways. Our goal in terms of fundraising was to just break even the first year, which was not an easy task, we felt, because we made a lot of investment in lights and cords and all kinds of things like that to support it. But we were able to make a small profit the first year. When we compared that to what was happening in other communities, we have modeled some of what we've done after the light show in Wilmer. They brought in $800 their first year. We brought in over $16,000 in donations the first year. Where they started at $800 the first year, they actually ended up taking in $250,000 over the first 5 years, and it grew from there. The last few years, they've taken in over $100,000 a year. So we know that there's potential for profit sharing that is good for us, but again, we want to keep our eye on making this an event that the community will support and it will benefit our community. What we are proposing, we met with our planning committee, which included people from SMSU who hosted us last year. And we listed a lot of the pros and cons, and we went over that. And a lot of us on the committee, I think, felt that maybe there was a better opportunity for location. We got kind of hidden back in there. We kind of got in the way once in a while when they were having any events. Tara talked with the people that served on the committee and were part of the decision to host it last year, and while they'd very much like to host us, they actually agreed that having it at Independence Park would be better for the community, more visibility, some of those things. So we were happy that they agreed with that because we didn't want to rock any boats there or, damage any relationships. But they assured us that wouldn't be the case, that they would support that move. The other big plus for us is that there's a whole lot more, I think, accessibility for electricity at Independence Park. Probably one of the hardest things the first year was we had 13 generators or somewhere around there.
But on average 10.
Yeah, 10 to 13 generators every given night. Every day they had to be picked up at the end of the night. We stored them overnight. Next day we gassed them all up. We put them all out, plugged in all the lights. It was a lot of work. So having a little more accessibility electricity would be fabulous. I think Preston had kind of a plan where he says he thinks we would be able to flip a switch. And let me tell you, that would save an awful lot of work for a lot of our volunteers on some cold nights. So there's just a lot of reasons that we feel that this would be a good location. Visibility is one. It's just a beautiful, beautiful park. There's a few shelters there that will help us out. We really didn't have that out at SMSU. We were out in the cold wind, and you all know what it's like out on campus there. So what we're looking for is approval from the council to host us at Independent Park, and we would really like to see a long-term agreement that, of course, either party could, with notice, get out of if it was necessary. But for a couple of reasons, just kind of to secure some stability for both of us, that you're going to host us there, and if there's any improvements that you need to make at all to help over the years, we would be willing to pay some rent. And what we're proposing to you is a written agreement, 10 years, where we would pay you $1,000 a year base rent to start with, and then also 2.5% of any profits that we make on the event. So that probably would grow over time is our hope. Again, our hope was within 5 years that we would be able to bring in donations between $50,000 and $100,000, and based on other communities like size that have done this, I think that's realistic. So that we would be giving you back something for the rent. The other thing that a written agreement to lease or rent or whatever that space is that we have a manger scene as part of our Light Up the Night, and there's been in some communities an issue of church and state, but if we're renting it from you, that takes you out of the equation. And I know there's an example not too far from here where that's exactly what happened. Somebody questioned that. They rented the space, and legally that, and you would have to probably, but apparently after that it's not an issue. So because we are paying the city for use of that land, so it becomes our issue, not yours. So, and that's a partnership with Holy Redeemer. And we're hoping this year to expand our partnerships with some of the churches to make that a little bit more of our.
Very good, thank you, Patty.
All right.
Scott or Preston, do you have anything you wanted to add at this point?
No, I think,
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The only thing I would add, I helped volunteer with, like they said, putting out the generators and filling them up at night and putting them away and carrying them through the snow and all that stuff. And it definitely wasn't fun. And, you know, the gas in little jugs and filling them up every night. At Independence Park, I've had some preliminary discussions with MMU about running extra power in flush mount pads where we'd set up temporary power panels, and they said they'd be willing to assist on that. As far as like electrical costs with all LED lights, I think it's going to be pretty minimal. It's just going to be, I think it's more visible from the community, you know, Highway 23, Lion Street, stuff like that. We may need to communicate with the people that live right on Lion Street just for traffic that normally isn't going to Independence Park on a winter day. Usually it's kind of slow, but until we kind of get an agreement, I think we can work through some of those other things though.
We'll open up for questions that the council may have. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks a lot for the presentation and that. Your first year was amazing. Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't know about it right away. I'm kind of a little absent during that time, but Councilman Lozinski and a few others brought it up shortly after it started, and we made multiple trips out there, and it was pretty amazing. So my question really is that I understand the rental thing, and I respect that, and I appreciate that. Does it have to be $1,000? I mean,
I think your point, Pat, is that it should be a rental agreement to,
Right.
you know,
Of some
cover
kind, I mean,
responsibility.
right.
I mean, I
That's
don't know what
negotiable.
our costs would be, you know.
Yep.
I know, Preston, you guys volunteered some time, but it's a community piece, and that's kind of, to me, what community service is, and I appreciate how you guys manage your time and engage in the community, and you know, I think that's part of it. I recognize that we need to keep a pretty visible separation line here to be proper. So, you know, maybe at that point in time, maybe that is proper. I don't know. It just seems high to me for a public event using a public facility that we're going to charge you folks for something. I want it to be a reasonable and legitimate contract, but I don't think we need to make a profit on it.
And I think we'd all be completely supportive of that. We just,
Right.
it's kind of new. We rent out the shelters and we rent out the ball fields, but we don't really have a rental fee for the park per se. So we just kind of came up with a starting number. So.
Sure. And I mean, I guess I'd leave that to, I think our departments do a really good job of making those determinations, so I wouldn't necessarily set it, but I guess I would be really in favor of them developing an agreement that we could come to, and I just want to go on record as saying that, you know, if we need 1,000 to come out on it, great, but if we don't, I don't think we should. I think we need to be fair about this too, because it is community. I was amazing, and I really appreciate it. I heard nothing but high praise about it. I think you guys should be commended for that.
With regard to the lights, would they be along the walking path, or where along the streets, or where would all the lighting be?
We really haven't laid out a plan yet. You know, if we have an agreement, I think we'd meet with Preston and kind of go through the park and identify, you know, the best areas. But I think somewhat we would stay away from the perimeter of the highway so that people would have to really come in to see and not just, but see enough from the highway to say, oh, we need to go back there and see what's happening. So we don't really have a plan, but were you able to see last year?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So it
Very
would be
nice.
similar to that, you know, we would kind of just.
We just have a lot more to work with as far as
Yeah.
mature trees and different heights and buildings. You know, we would put lights on the bridges but probably try to stay away from the sidewalk perimeter.
I'm just thinking Lions, you know, has a lot of heavy traffic and stuff, and
Yeah, right.
people gawking and looking at their lights and stuff. It's more of a hazard than it was out at the university.
Yeah.
So is that a concern at all?
Well, one of the things we've talked about is having volunteers to help out near the street too, just to direct people if there are lines into, you know, the parking lot or whatever it might be. And one of our great volunteers last year really helped when we got backed up a few times, and she's with public safety, so she was really good at it. So we would, you know, as much as we could as volunteers, help with that too.
Yeah, and one of our
But-
goals is to bring people more into the park, and make it more interactive. I think hopefully we can utilize the Parkside parking lot as well, and your beautiful new parking lot that's out there, and the other one. But we would certainly have volunteers directing them where to go, but there's definitely a lot more parking than we had available at SMSU, especially on event nights.
I don't know if you've been to La Crosse, Wisconsin. They have a big lighting event there during the month of December, and it's just fantastic. They have just a lot of people just lined up in cars, driving around and walking through it. It's a fantastic thing, and it's set up by the Rotary Club there in La Crosse. But it's amazing what they do with the lights, and how they have manger seeds and animals, and it's all kinds of things there, and entertainment and so forth. So
Yeah, and we hope
light
to.
shows are a big goal. We'd like to grow to that eventually within 3 to 5 years for sure.
And with the park, I think especially doing more activities, like Tara said, to draw people in and, participate in those
it's really a
activities
family
that they-
type of thing.
Yeah, very much.
My only question, one to Councilmember Bear-Kohler, I think the traffic will be a self-mitigating thing because it'll get busy enough that traffic will naturally slow down on Lion Street. Tara, you
It's true.
addressed parking with Parkside. Just make sure that was going to be my question. Have you talked to the schools to use that parking and let the neighborhoods know that this might be an issue? But I think this is great. Like everybody said, I went to it and I was amazed. I'm originally from Cloquet, which is where Bentleyville started, and Bentleyville moved to Duluth, and because Cloquet said, no, we're not going to do it, they whoa and rue the day they sent it to Duluth, because it is a big deal, and it makes a ton of money for that city. So I think this is wonderful, and putting it there will get you the notice. And then I would also recommend you advertise it on that billboard out there.
Yeah. That was one of the things with the short time frame we had to work with last year. We didn't promote outside as much as we had hoped, so that will be more of a priority this year.
So just a clarification, Sharon, the request tonight is for the authorization, recognizing that there's actually some agreements that will have to be developed over the next few weeks.
Mr. Mayor, we would work with Prairie Home Hospice and our Community Services Division and the city attorney to come up with an agreement.
I would move to.
I would second it.
Yeah, I'd move to accept it. He's second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig. Did you want to second?
I was going to say we don't have a contract yet to look at to approve, and
We're
the
directing.
devil is in the details. Yep, you're right.
But just to clarify the motion was to approve the request and
Absolutely.
authorize the city officials to work with Prairie Home Hospice and develop a contractual agreement that will come back to the council.
Correct.
That was your motion.
That was my motion.
That's the one I seconded.
Other discussion of the motion?
What I'm wondering too is, there's a lot of uncertainty here from your standpoint and ours, and would it make any sense to try it a year and see how it all goes before you enter a 10-year agreement?
Well, and I think, like I said, the agreement, has to have an exit clause of some kind for both parties, if,
Right.
for whatever reason it might be.
In my mind, the contract gives you the ability to do it, but doesn't demand that you do it.
Yeah, something like that.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Thank you, Preston. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Looking for the actual wording of the motion here. What's the actual wording?
Wait, doesn't have the actual wording.
So, could you rephrase the motion?
Okay, Councilmember Barraculler is asked to restate the motion. I'll do my best. Steve, you made the motion, but
No, I can do it. I would move, my motion was that we allow staff to develop a contract entering into, with collaboration with Prairie Home Hospice to do a light up the night at Independence Park with contingencies as we've both agreed, and out, and let them do it.
Kyle, that's the motion you have recorded.
With the idea that the contract's going to be sent to the
Yeah,
city council for approval.
And that motion does pass, so Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Tara. Agenda item number 16. Agenda item number 16 is the Community Planning Division Annual Report. This will be presented by Ilya Gutman. With us also is Jason Anderson from that department, as well as Ray Hendrickson. Ilya?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I will present some annual report, and we were planning on having it annual, as it's annual report, as the name implies. Just figure out if I can manage this. Okay. So I will talk about codes first, and then I will talk about the department in general. The codes are written to prevent disasters like death and from fires or structural failures. And Minnesota State Building Code is based on the ICC family. ICC stands for International Code Council. ICC family of codes. You can see all of them to the left, and it includes some amendments. The Minnesota State Building Code changes every 6 years. So now I will talk about State Building Code. The purpose of the State Building Code is to safeguard the public health, safety, and general welfare, and to provide safety for firefighters who have to come sometimes if fire unfortunately happens. And we all have to remember that building code is a minimum standard, and it can always be surpassed. So, practical code is a jurisdiction official statement on the minimum required level of building safety, and technical is just a collection of minimum safety standards. There are plenty of books and standards that the code encompasses, like fire, building, plumbing, and so on. So to give you an idea, this is a list of all the paperwork the code includes. It's the different codes and different manuals and standards. So basically all of this stuff is mandatory. So what does building code give us? It provides consistent standards to ensure safe construction and use of the building, and also it helps maintain market values of the building. You should all know that Minnesota Building Code is applicable statewide. Unfortunately, it's just enforced in certain areas, mostly in larger cities. The first code in Minnesota was done in '71, and we should all know that if the city adopts the code, it cannot get rid of that. And the city of certain sizes, more than 5,000, must have a code enforced. This is from the building code that basically it says that the permits are required for any work that people do in construction. And that's the intent of the code. It just basically lists, as you can see, erect, install, enlarge, alter, repair, remove, basically everything. And then the code lists the exceptions. There are a few exceptions, probably think about a dozen of them, and these are here listed the most important ones. That one-story detached accessory structure, so basically accessory storage less than 200 square feet, and fences less than 7 feet. The new code, 2015, the current code was adopted several years ago. It included several significant changes, like smoke and CO detectors were mandatory, and sprinklers, just major things, sprinklers for triplexes and fourplexes. This is current code right now, but this state is already working on the next code. It will be based on 2018 family of codes, and I think it will be ready for adoption at the beginning of 2020. Just a few organizational changes have taken place recently in the department, and you can see the people who work for the department. I should also mention, I talked about code before, but the department also deals with the city zoning ordinance and the city housing code. Recently, we have written and adopted a new mission statement, and I can read it: to protect the public life, health, and welfare, and improve the quality of life through the adoption, interpretation, education, and enforcement of the Minnesota Building Code and zoning ordinances in a fair, cooperative, and efficient manner. We will advance the overall growth of the community by being a resource to our economic development partners. Through education and cooperation, we will build positive working relationship with the building community and citizens alike. Now I will switch to a little bit of statistics. So you can see here the two charts. One talks about permits, it's basically number of permits, and another one is valuation in millions of dollars. Majority of the permit counts comes from the residential permits, while the majority of most of the valuation, of course, comes from the large commercial projects. You can see there was a spike in 2011-2012 in the number of permits. That was the result of the hailstorm that occurred at that time. So practically every roof and every siding was replaced at that time. I looked at the average, and in the last 6 years, the average valuation for the city of Marshall is about $28 million, which is pretty good. It's higher than many comparable cities, including, for example, North Mankato, Albert Lee. This is the residential building permit statistics. You can see that for single families, except for the spike in 2013 and the dip in 2015, it's pretty consistent number of single family houses built. The units is units within the multiple family dwellings, so the single family are not included in the statistics for the units. This is the latest statistics. It's this year through May 31st. And you can see that the number of permits is a little bit lower, but you can see that the valuation is significantly higher compared to the same period of last year. And the reason is bigger projects like the Aldis and Menards. This is a building permit fees just to comparison of Marshall with other cities, and you can see that Marshall has one of the lowest fees in the region. This is our current permit application that I want to talk a little bit. We are trying to make it as easy for people as possible, so people can apply online, or they can stop by and fill out an application. I mean, if someone wants, they can take an application home and fill it out at home and bring it in, but they can do the same thing from the website. They can print the application and bring it to us, or they can do it online totally. In this case, it just comes directly to Chris. They can pay whether with check, cash, or credit card, and the credit card payments are taken over the phone. So again, to make it easier for people to pay. We try to make it as unintrusive as possible, so minimize the disturbance for the people. So if we need to do pre-inspection, we try to do it, but usually we just minimize it and just call people or just figure it out from the construction documents. In addition, of course, if someone has questions, we can always meet with them anywhere, their place, at our place, and discuss it even before the permit, they apply for the permit. As everyone else, we have challenges. One of the biggest one is the lack of code enforcement in the surrounding areas. They said the bigger cities enforce the building code, but the smaller cities and rural areas do not, even though the code is mandatory everywhere through the state of Minnesota. And of course, that may give some impression that Marshall is unique or something different. Of course, the other problem that we have is that the code is very difficult and complex, and it has many, they showed many different books and manuals that we have to deal with. So we are obviously trying to make it easier. The best way for us is we are trying to communicate with people as much as we can. So we talk to them, we have classes for the contractors, we have annual meetings with the contractors. We answer all questions as much as we can at any time. We meet with people before they apply for the permit or any time during the construction and answer all the questions. We also have a very helpful website that we try to make better all the time, and there's a lot of useful information there. We try to promote it as much as we can, so people can always go there and find information there that can answer their questions. And of course, we should also remember that we also work with practically everyone, even people who don't apply for the building permit. We are trying to make buildings in Marshall safe for them, even though they don't apply for the permit. Well, in conclusion, this is basically the summary of that. We have to enforce the code. We try to do it as easy for people as possible. We have plenty of open permits, and some of them are, as you can see, very old. And we have, this year has been started pretty good. We have quite a few projects like Aldi, Menards, church projects, and we expect that there will be more projects in the near future. And I will conclude with asking if you have any questions.
Thank you. Questions? If not, thank you, Aya, for your report.
Thank you.
Move then to agenda item number 17. Agenda item number 17 is the Saratoga Street Reconstruction Project. We have a resolution for Municipal State Aid System 2018 Advance Funds. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This one is a replacement of a previous resolution as directed by the MnDOT. They had indicated to us the procedure that they would like to use for our previous resolution, and that was just asking for the additional state aid due to the over bid of the project. And after they reviewed it, they decided that they'd rather have it include all of the outstanding advanced state aid plus the existing advanced state aid, so it was clear to MnDOT in St. Paul what the total advance is. So we replaced that resolution, sent it to MnDOT for their approval. They approved it today, and we're bringing it to you for approval. So you can see that we have a little bit left of our 5 times the annual apportionment, but not a lot. What that means is that we probably won't be able to do a state aid advance for a couple of years as our $770,000 per year grows. So in our CIP, the impact would probably be to push back a couple of state aid projects. But we recommend this one be approved. We've already received about $2+ million of this advance for our use for the payment to contractors.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. Questions? John?
I think, as in the past, if more funds become available, that could make the change for future years then. And that's kind of why we've been, I think this is a common thing that we've always been, you might say, overextended in this area because we do end up getting more funds at times if they're available. Is that correct?
And as a matter of fact, the more we ask for, the more money we do get.
Yep.
So in the formula, by being high on the advance level, we actually receive more money.
Which does make sense because MnDOT wants to allocate the dollars to communities that have a need, that are growing and have projects. So rather than a flat amount to every community, is really based on projects.
That's correct.
I move the resolution.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion.
I do have some questions here. When we looked at this project 2 weeks ago or a week or whatever, and it came in 15% over budget, at that time the discussion was, could we push this project back? And the consensus was, well, probably not. But now you're saying we have other projects we can push back to pull in more of the state aid to do this project. And yes, we passed it as a council, and that's fine, it's done. But it's one of these where we're going farther in debt on a project that was 15% over budget. We need to take a look at how we do these projects as a council and think of our citizens that, maybe we should backtrack on this one and look at the funding that maybe this project is coming in quite high and we're borrowing a lot of money to do it. So,
Clarify that.
Yeah,
so.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, as far as the municipal state aid, that's an allocation given to us by the state for projects that are eligible for the funding. So it's not a loan. It could be considered as a loan, but it's not. It's an allocation made per year that's given to us for us to spend.
Cost share.
It is, but what other state aid projects, now you said we have to push other projects back. What are they? Do they have more of a pressing issue next year? You're telling me we're pushing projects back, but I don't know what projects we're pushing back.
I'll give you an example. Probably North 4th Street, when we have that on the agenda, we have not designed it. We have it on our CIP, but we would only do that project when funds became available, rather than either participate more with city funds or increase special assessments to accommodate it. So we believe that, that's what our CIP is for. The CIP is for a plan that as we get closer, like when we're within 3 years, 2 years, we have to make those decisions of commitment of funding. So that's what we would be doing with that 770, and it'll increase slightly each year. It'll be more than that next year. And the state has adequate funding to call their funding that they have in the bank adequate enough so that they are promoting taking advances from it. So I guess for the city of Marshall, yes, we are allocating some more of that designated state aid for the project, but I think it's the proper thing to do, because you don't have to bond for this money. You don't have to borrow the money.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote on the motion. Motion passes. Agenda item number 18. Agenda item number 18 is consider the resolution regarding amendments to the special assessment policy for the city of Marshall. Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. These amendments began with some, a work session with Council in February. Mr. Lozinski believes that government moves slowly. He thinks it took a long time to get this back, and from government's perspective, we got here in a hurry. So,
thank you, Dennis.
For government, it's good.
The major changes that are proposed, we have been asked to look at how can city step up to the plate and pay a little more on the projects, and citizens pay a little less through the special assessment process. 2 changes are being recommended. First change would be that the city and the citizen would split the cost 50-50 for residential driveway replacements. Any enlargements or a second driveway or something, that would be 100% at the homeowner. But right now, that's at 100% of the homeowner cost. This proposal is split 50-50. And also, the city has, and for any of you that have been through the special assessment hearings, we often hear from the off-street owners, wait a minute, street's not been improved in front of me, but you want me to pay a portion of it. We have removed that obligation as well, so there's no off-street participation, and the driveways split 50-50 are basically the changes that are proposed in this policy. Minnesota law requires that if you're going to use the 429 special assessment, at least 20% of the street projects must be covered by special assessments. Glenn Olson from the engineering department's provided a summary here which shows on these past projects the percentages that have been paid by special assessments. And even with the city assuming the additional off-street costs and the driveway, we still think we will be within the minimum 20% requirement for special assessments. And that's based upon the projected costs. You have to be able to verify up front that we think the project will cost X, at least 20% of X will be paid by special assessments. You'll see the numbers usually are in the low 20s. Ultimately, we had one that must have come in way under budget because it was only about 13% was paid by special assessments. But I believe we'll still be in the low 20% would be assessed on projects with the proposed changes. The other changes proposed are just some cleanup language to bring the local deferral process in line with the state statutes. But the major financial changes are as previously discussed.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Before we open up for questions for Dennis, I know the staff, the Ways and Means Committee, spent numerous meetings, lots of time on this, so thank you for coming up with a recommendation that will never be correct in everybody's mind, but it's probably a really good change to the policy and does address the some of the concerns that have been brought up at our most recent assessment, but still has that balance between participation, between special assessments, our general tax levy, and the various revenue funds, including stormwater and municipal utilities. So a lot of work went into that, so thank you for that. We'll open up for
That's to get it here in a hurry, just so we can.
Faster than the speed of government.
Just a clarification, and I visited with Dennis and Glenn and Sharon on this earlier today. Frontage, so houses on corners, the side yards will no longer, it's just the frontage of the homes is the way it reads now, correct?
It would be, they would be responsible for an assessment if they had work done adjacent to their property, immediately adjacent.
Immediate adjacent.
So whether it's the short side or the long side, okay, they would have an assessment. However, there is a provision in there for the credit of the, number one, $5,500 maximum currently, and we go back to the life of that other project and give credit for that on a depreciated value. So, for instance, if 10 years ago you had one side done of your corner lot, and this year you had the other side done of that corner lot, we would take 50% of that assessment that you got 10 years ago, credited against your $5,500 maximum this time.
And that 50% is based on the fact that 10 years is half of the design life of that.
That's
previous
correct.
street.
And we've identified the life of each of the improvements as well, so that it's not an arbitrary number. So that's how we would give credit, so that over that life of the project in front and beside your home, you had $5,500 maximum, and that could change over time, but $5,500 maximum for both of them.
And further in our discussion today, and because John came up with a good idea of trying to add it to ad valorem so much every year. Now, and I just want to clarify, visiting with Sharon, and she can fill us in later, and she kind of helped enlighten me. She has not gone through a budget yet. So like her saying dropping this into the budget this year is going to be a change in I don't know if you added up how much is an add, because we're adding to our ad valorem taxes by changing this. This is a work in process. I think this is a good compromise. I had a nice meeting today with those three. It's something I think we need to continue to work on for, I like a special assessment, property taxes. Anytime you're taking money from the citizens for whatever, it's a tax. we can call it whatever we want, special assessments, fees, property taxes. We need to always be looking at the best way to do this. I think this is a good start. I do think we need to revisit how we handle commercial property, because a lot of that still falls 100% on commercial properties, and that's very hard on our small businesses. That part was not necessarily, I don't know if the committee addressed it or not, but that's something that we need to take a look at as our commercial properties and continue to work on this. It's a flowing project here. I believe I find it acceptable going forward for a short term, but I think it's something that we need to continue to look at. And Dennis and Glenn, we had that discussion today, that it's something, if we're going to start dumping more of it onto our ad valorem taxes, we need to give our city administrator, who's only been here 6 months, a little more heads up on how we're going to do this. But I think that we continue to work on this and continue to make it better. I think this is a good start. I think this is a good compromise. We're splitting driveways. I know Craig and I have chatted about sidewalks. We want people to have sidewalks. I would like to see the city pick up the full tab of sidewalks to connect our community. It was something that years ago, I don't know if you were mayor yet when that vote passed.
I was on the council.
In 1989, that was actually, and I know that was 30 years ago, but it was passed, well, couldn't quite 30 because I voted, so I was 18. But that was something that passed in the city of Marshall, that we wanted sidewalks. And it's something that connects our community, and I know that's a discussion. We split them 50-50 now, which is a good start. But that's something I think we need to continue to look at. The city wants sidewalks, we should fund sidewalks. So as of this point, I can support this as long as we continue to look at it, continue to change it, not just put it onto the shelf and have it come up again in 10 years. I think these ordinances need to flow and change with the times.
Thank you, Jim.
And I'm done.
And Jim is correct in that this addresses the residential assessments. It does not address the commercial or the, I'll call them the half streets, the streets that only have a accessible property on one side of the street. So, John?
I guess a couple of things that we've talked about, and we did go through quite a bit of discussion and ways and means on this, just to give you some idea, and I know this is very preliminary from the start of it, but what we'd be looking for if we put this all on the ad valorem, bare minimum, we're looking at about 13 to 15% increase in a year, plus anything else that we're looking at. So, yeah, it would be safe to say that we probably would be looking, if we enacted this year for next year, I'm just going to take a guess and say we might have to be at a 20% levy increase if we did this.
And clarify that is not what the proposal is.
That is, and there'd be the reason why we didn't go there. Yeah, because that is a pretty heavy impact. As far as doing this over a period of time, in myself and thinking about it, that would say that for the next 10 years, we would have to commit that the council would be doing a steady increase each year in doing that. That would make, looking around here, who knows who's going to be around here in 10 years to say that, yes, that's something we really want to do and be able to, we really can't make that commitment for a council in the future. So, as such, that was not really a realistic way to go either. I do agree, at some point that would be a good way of doing it, but that also limits us, as we found out, and I pointed out in one of the previous, the last one or the one before, that does limit our bonding options if we did go to an all ad valorem. Right now, we're able to use the 429 bonding method, and that does save us some time and a few things there. And I want to say it's the 474 method is the one that we had to use. Is that the right number? 475, close, within one. Okay, is the bonding method that we have to use, and we had to use about 2 weeks ago on a project because the assessments don't come up to the 20%. That encumbers some things in doing those bonds. So it's not a ideal situation in any case. So, Yeah, this was intended to address the residential side and not the commercial, and, you know, we honestly did look at all kinds of different angles, different tactics on it, and came to the conclusion that this is really the best for now. And like I said, there's always room for improvement, but it's going to be quite a process.
Glenn?
Glenn, you talked about the credit for corner lots. Where in the document is that credit located?
I'll have to find it.
I'm trying to find it. I
Yeah.
haven't been able to
I'll
locate it.
look.
Because what I see in the policy is it says corner lots shall be assessed on the same basis as any other
That's it.
residential lot.
That's it. So that's as any other residential lot. So if you get an improvement, that's how it will be assessed. So if you've got 60 feet of frontage on a corner lot on the project that's being constructed, that will be your assessment amount with a maximum of $5,500, and that's set by the resolution of fees and rates on an annual basis. It's set by the resolution of fees and rates on an annual basis for the maximum.
And then it's also got the other street or the other side potential if there's a project within 10 years.
That's correct.
That prorate piece.
Yeah, it's actually within 20 years. If your project is a total reconstruction, I believe in the life of the project is 20 years. If it's 10 years old, you'll get a 50% credit of that against your maximum.
So if it's 19 years old, you'll get a 10%.
Yeah, that's correct.
5%.
Or 5%,
Yeah,
I'm
5%.
sorry.
Well, my concern is this, I don't see any of that written here in the policy. And I did look at, we got the Minnesota League of Cities suggested policies, and it talks about corner lot adjustments. And their suggested wording would be that the short side of the corner lot would be assessed the actual front footage. The long side will be assessed 1/2 the actual side footage, or 75 feet, whichever is greater. I went through a number of the other cities in Minnesota that have corner lot policies, and they're specific as to exactly how the policy works. And if I look at our policy, I don't see that wording there for the protection of the homeowners. It just says it's going to be assessed like any other lot. And I feel like we need more detail there as to exactly what the policy is as to how corner lots are going to be treated. Like I said, another one, they have all kinds of formulas that they're using. I think we need to have something like that in there.
With it, I don't want it, though, to be limited to the front foot or the side footage by a multiplier, because there are cases when we assess per each, like in cul-de-sacs. We have them when we're done by the square footage, if you have triangular shaped lots or different shaped lots. But the intent of the wording was to assess those corner lots as any other residential lot is assessed.
Well,
That was
and
the
they do
intent.
have provisions for cul-de-sacs, irregular shaped lots and so forth, and they give details as to how exactly your assessment is computed. And one of them was pretty plain in their wording, in the fact that they want to make sure that you're not over-assessed if you have a corner lot.
Right.
If I could find,
Also, if you talk about the league's suggestion, there is no maximum shown.
but they do.
And that's
they-
how this is kind of taken care of, by having a maximum, whether it's your long side or your short side, or you've done a project on one street. Sometimes that person gets assessed on both sides of their project at the same project. And so then it's strictly a maximum $5,500 when those are done. So that's why when you say, when we say in the suggestion that it's as any other residential lot in the district, that's what we mean by that.
And isn't that, just to clarify, because I think, Glenn, this kind of gets at the backside, and I appreciate where you're going with this, is that that's the $5,500 because that was actually a judgment that came from a court case. So the advantage that we've had, I know we've talked about this a couple other times in the past, is That's why we go back to the policy that we currently have, is because it has the $5,500 max, which some of those other criteria that the League of Minnesota Cities doesn't have that. So if we use some of those formulas, we could end up over that and then actually be in jeopardy for the court ruling. If I get that right, I think that's the way that.
Well, that was the intent.
Yeah, okay.
But all of these policies of the other cities, they can still have a 5,500 limit. They're just not specifically stating it in their policy itself. Again, it's limited to the increase in the benefits that the property receives. What I'm saying, though, is these provide guidance to make sure that corner lots are not penalized, and then they end up paying more for special assessments than they should. And this one, it says, our goal is to ensure a corner lot is assessed only one time for improvement projects, not on both sides.
And I disagree with that. So.
What's that?
And I disagree with that, but that's up to council.
So, under the current policy, is it possible that if a homeowner is going to end up with more, let's say $11,000 worth of assessments for his lot?
No.
Under any circumstances, it's never going to happen.
Over the next 50 years they would, but they would never spend more than the $5,500 on any individual assessment.
It could potentially happen in 21 years.
Yeah.
It could potentially happen
That's
in
great.
21 years.
Or it could happen
Yes.
if they have some private improvements that they included on the project
Sure.
assessment. So like doubling size.
Yeah, their sewer service line extension, their driveway additions, their, anything that would be private.
With regard to the $5,500 limit, then, you're using the useful life of the project. It's not necessarily the 10 years or the 8 years over which they're paying it.
Correct. Useful life of the project. And that's identified in the policy.
Okay. Is there other discussion on the motion? Or do we have a
Mr. Mayor,
motion?
when are
No,
we-
just have a motion.
When are we going to address the commercial issues then? Because I think that's very important. We want to attract businesses into Marshall, and yet we penalize them.
I would say, I would make a motion, I have not making one, but that we do that, and that needs to be addressed next. I know Ways and Means has met the lot, but I think that needs to be part of the addressed. And I'll give it 6 months, Dennis.
The way that we have addressed that in the past is the council always has the option of changing the commercial and industrial assessments. I'll give you an example. By the Mike's Cafe project, when we determined that that road didn't have anyone else fronting on the other side, the city stepped up and paid 50%.
And that's fine and dandy, but I think it's good to have a policy, so
Sure.
as businesses are looking at coming to Marshall, that's not our policy. They read this,
It's
well,
not.
we could build here and get socked on this really hard.
Right. And I'm
So-
okay with trying to identify that, but that can be fairly significant for both the city and the property owners. Sometimes individual industrial or commercial properties are very unique. And I can give you an example about our industrial park where Schwann's is. It's fairly unique in that I would doubt that most of you have never driven on the street. Okay? And that's because all of the streets and all of the infrastructure in certain areas are only for that business. Now, the community certainly benefits by having that business there, but those streets are that way. If you take Main Street, that's different. That's, all of us drive on those streets almost every day. And those commercial properties, then, we participate in with some of our state aid money when we did assessments to both the alley side and the street side. So I think you're right. I think by establishing a policy that other people can read and what is their expectation of what is that street going to cost me 20 years from now, I think that's a good thing to review, but understanding that those areas are really unique.
And that's where maybe we have to look at it's commercial one policy and industrial one policy, because you're correct, they are two different things.
I guess just, kind of jump in on this one as far as the keeping in mind the costs. We do considerable amount of road construction here, and the assessments alone are, we're talking over $1 million. If we just go back to the action we took earlier tonight, we've got over $1 million in what we call commercial, or if you want to do it in industrial or whatever, that, we would be taking part in. Now, we're a little concerned whether committing $25,000 for the Historical Society, if we were going to do half that, that's $500,000 that we got to be talking about. That's got to come from someplace, and the only place is ad valorem. So keep that in mind as we talk about these. Yes, it comes from those commercial businesses and industrial businesses, and I agree, they're very high, and look at them, but someplace along the line, we've got to come up with the money. So it's either that or we spread it out, and it does get it added into the ad valorem and to our levy. So as you're talking about that, keep in mind you're talking about increasing a levy significantly, because $500,000 in a levy for one project in the commercial, if you were going to do half, is a pretty sizable increase. That would be probably 7%, 8%. So, okay.
64,000 is 1% levy.
So, yeah, it's, I'm fine with that. It just, keep in mind the ramifications of those things, so.
Well, and the, good discussion about the commercial assessment. And then that's, there's some future work that needs, and probably plenty of discussion. The work that has been done is the residential assessment, so let's limit our discussion to residential assessment.
And with that, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the.
Actually, I have a motion. I
Oh, we do have it?
We don't have a motion on the table.
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
No. So I'll make a motion to approve the resolution and approving the changes to the assessment policy.
I'll second it.
Motion by John, seconded by Jim. Discussion?
And you're probably tired of this, but again, I want to make sure we're straight on this corner lot thing. If you have, on the front of your house, you have a street project, that's one project. And then later, another project does the side street. Those are two separate projects. And what is the useful life of those projects supposed to be then?
In a total reconstruction, it's 20 years for reconstruction.
20 years.
Yep.
And so, where exactly is the language here in this policy that says that you're getting the credit or whatever? The way I would read this, you could get charged $5,500 for both of them. Show me where it says you wouldn't happen.
I will have to find it, Dennis, if you want to.
What was discussed
Yeah,
earlier,
it's
assessed as other.
other residential lots.
Where is that at?
I mean,
Where's the detail on that?
It'd be on page 15 on the irregularly shaped lots. Corner lots shall be assessed on the same basis as any other residential lot. So any other residential lot has a $5,500 maximum as well. It's not just the corner lots. And if you have multiple projects on that lot, no matter where it is, that's your maximum. And it does then reference also the life of the projects. I will have to find that.
That's page 25.
Yes.
But when you say it'll be assessed on the same basis as any other residential lot, that's not necessarily a true statement, is it? Because a regular lot is based on frontage, and irregular ones are based on area.
But sometimes corner lots are rectangular as well.
Right.
So they would be assessed for the, okay. You have two types of projects. One that would encompass both directions, both your front and your side, and those are fairly simple, straightforward, $5,500 maximum, assessed like anyone else. If in fact you had that same project separated into two projects, separated by 10 years, let's make it easy, then you would have the $5,500 max for each one, and a credit for the first one that was done based upon that life cycle. Okay?
What you're saying is you're going to get 5,500 for the first one
Yeah.
and half of 5,500 for the second one if it was
Yeah.
done in there. And I'm wondering if some of that is that in the fee schedule, and maybe if
It's in
not,
the
then
fee schedule.
we should, and that may be
And
what
that'll
you're looking
change
at,
every year.
Glenn.
That's-
And
It
I
really
know
should
what-
be in the fee schedule.
Yeah.
That gets looked at on an annual basis, and if not, if it's not clear enough in there, as we look at it again this, coming up
Yeah.
here real soon, we should probably
we
make
could
sure it's in there.
include that
You're
there.
exactly right. A reference to something so
We-
that we can go find what
Right.
We
the
can do
actual
that.
calculations are. That's what I'm
And I
looking
think
for.
that's in the fee schedule, it's not in
'Cause
this
this is
policy.
pretty vague the way it
Yeah.
is right now. It doesn't really tell much. So that's the improvement I was looking for, is something
Okay.
to that effect.
Okay. Other discussion on the motion that is on the table? If not, good discussion, we'll move to a vote.
And thanks for all the work that went into this.
Before I vote on this, so is there going to be language added to that effect where they will refer it? Or is it just going to stay the way it is right now? Because right now, I feel like it's vague and it doesn't really say much.
I can put it in our next review, because you'll see it within 6 months.
So we are going to modify it and
Modify.
add, adjust
Can I
language.
ask Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? My understanding for some of this language, it's really procedure on how the finance department calculates out these assessments, and in some ways, we are over-communicating how we calculate these assessments. This is a policy for the council. It's not necessarily the procedure, and I didn't feel in any of those meetings that either Carla or Nat in the finance department would have any issues on figuring out the intent of this policy, that they could calculate out the assessment based on the intent. But that's the impression I got. I think in some ways we have too much verbiage on here on how these are calculated. This is a policy. It's not necessarily a procedure, and my impression is the finance department can calculate it out without the added language. But
And that's what page 19, paragraph F at the top, it said, "The assessment rolls are prepared by city staff pursuant to the provisions of state statute. Assessment rolls are prepared and then approved by council." So, you know,
Voting's underway.
Not to be a stickler, but we should vote and not discuss.
I'll just indicate that I agree with the special assessment policy generally. I looked at a number of other special assessment policies for other cities. They're more specific in as to exactly how they handle corner lots, and I think we should do the same. We do this for the protection of the taxpayers, so that if there's a disagreement or confusion or whatever, they know exactly what the special assessment policy is and how much they should be assessed. And if other cities can be more detailed as to how they do it, corner lots, I think the city of Marshall can too.
So that motion does pass. The amendments to the special assessment policy now will be in place. Agenda item number 19. Agenda item number 19 is a statement of performance evaluation for City Administrator Sharon Hansen. Earlier this evening, the council did meet in special session to review the performance. This is a 6-month review. Passed out a summary of that review, and I'll read that into the record. Sharon Hansen began as administrator for the City of Marshall in November 2017. The Marshall City Council conducted a 6-month evaluation of performance for Administrator Hansen. The performance evaluation instrument evaluated 10 areas identified in the position description These areas included job knowledge and professional skills, relations with elected members of the City Council, policy execution, strategic vision, fiscal management, intergovernmental affairs, reporting and communication, citizen/community relations, staffing and supervision. Council members individually completed the evaluation instrument, scoring each category from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest level of performance. The compiled average of all City Council input in all 10 categories of work averaged 3.75, which is indicative of high level of performance in all categories of the position. The next evaluation that will be at the 1-year anniversary of employment, at which time there is eligibility for a step increase. So, good evaluation for council. Thanks Sharon Hansen for her work, and look forward to her continued good work as administrator for the City of Marshall. I would entertain a motion to accept the 6-month performance evaluation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jim. Now, discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 20 is the Commission Board Liaison Reports. Regional Development Commission will meet this Thursday. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. Marshall Lyon County Library met yesterday. Just did some business maintenance issues. There's some downspout issues. We had a pretty good rain going on, and there's going to be some work done on that. I know that our Public Works folks, I think Dean's going to go out there and do some, check out the roof and some other things with the downspouts. And we've got Southwest Glass coming out to look at some issues with some leaking on some windows. And then there was some other talk about landscaping and some other things. And then working with Finance Department and stuff citywide to look at some other additional abilities to collect fees, maybe some credit card processing and some other things to just kind of bring us in. And then there's a lot of work with trying to get the foundation up to speed and looking for new members on the library foundation. So if people are out there interested in being a part of the library, the foundation has kind of been reformed and is definitely looking for some people to join that and become active in that. There was a meeting of the Southwest Amateur Sports Commission today, the entire committee. And our marketing committee looked a lot at hotel and actually sent out a survey to local businesses and is going to be meeting with some of the hotel operators to look at kind of helping to enhance the experience and fulfill some more of the needs in Marshall. So I think it's pretty positive. The Southwest Amateur Sports Commission, I know I talked about it at our last meeting, we've refocused and broken into the two main commissions, the committees, the marketing and then the governance. And the governance is also looking at some enhancements there, maybe adding the floor that we talked about and some different ways to make that happen. So the use out there is increasing. And, I think things are pretty positive. So we're really looking at probably in July, they'll get a look at where things are at the ball fields and maybe start doing some RFPs for getting some advertisement and sponsorship put together out there. So a lot of positive things happening. We're getting in on year 3 now, so we're kind of getting the feet on the ground and really figuring out what the pace and the pulse of that is, and hopefully we can continue to move forward and make that an even better asset for the community and the region. So that's really all I have, Mr. Mayor, on that.
Thank you, Steve, or Craig. Steve?
Mine, I did not attend, did not meet.
Glenn?
It's my understanding that the Planning Commission is not going to be meeting this month. And we did meet with the Public Housing Commission yesterday. They had election of officers, and in the past they've had concerns about a washer-dryer service. There's a company that provides washer-dryer service to the apartments, and then the Housing Commission receives a rental fee from that monthly income every month. And we've been notified that the company that owns the washer-dryer service has sold it. There's going to be a new owner, and the new owner is looking at updating the machines, and I think getting the machines on a regular replacement basis so that we don't have machines that aren't working. So I think the commission is happy to find out that there'll be no new ownership and that they're going to be replacing some of the washing machines. Thank you.
John?
Regarding MMU work, getting the automated metering system is still moving on, but I'd also like to comment that I don't know if this month, Bill, is this your last meeting with MMU, and just thank Bill Zagenhagen for his service on the Utility Commission, but leaving the city, we will need to find a replacement for Bill. So, but thank you for the number of years that you put in. It was at least 8?
28, yep.
8 years, so. And I guess just a little update on the EDA. They're working towards a sale plan of auctioning off the remaining lots in the Parkway Edition that the city owns. So that still has yet to happen, but that's getting organized and put together. So.
And Jim? Okay. Move then to agenda item number 21, council member individual items. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one. I was really happy to see that apparently the county commissioners have kind of paid heed to the housing study, and looks like they're put into effect a tax abatement for new construction. And I guess I'd like to see our EDA, I think they talked about this previously this year, but maybe revisit that and see if it's something that maybe the city should do a parallel path with that, with what the county is doing for new housing and rental units, and see if there's an opportunity for us to also encourage some of that development. I think that's kind of that, I guess I would call it kind of that middle gap or middle demand housing that maybe we could do some things to fulfill that. There's been a little bit of discussion internally. I know one of the other council members has expressed interest in that, and we've, he and I, Mr. Lozinski and I have met with some city staff, and I think there's an opportunity here, and I think it'd be real advantageous for us to maybe flush that out and see if that's something that we want to participate in.
Steve and John, as the council liaisons to the EDA, would you take that to the EDA?
Yeah, that has been under discussion, and that has not come forward for action yet, but is definitely on our agenda.
Yeah, I think I think it's excellent. I'm really encouraged that I think the county took a look at that housing study, and I think it's very positive. So I think it'd be something good for us to look at also.
Thank you, Craig. Anything else? Steve?
I have nothing.
Glenn?
Some questions here for John. You indicated that they're going to be selling off these, or auctioning off the lots. How many lots are there?
Help me, Dennis. It's
Right now, there are 46 unsold lots still owned by the city. 35 are being put up for sealed bid auction. You can buy groups of either 3, 4, or 5. And so you would then have...
There's a minimum price.
the minimum price on the
minimum
lots.
price, yeah, for the lots.
And with the purchase of a grouping, they need to start construction of the home within 2 years on that group. So if somebody buys 2 groups, there are at least 2 homes that need to have construction start within 2 years.
Right. And we have started, well, EDA has started that advertising is this week. Flyers, bid packets are going out to various developers, contractors within not just City of Marshall, but the entire area. We've had some inquiries from Hendricks Lumberyard, Tyler, Wood Lake, and the sealed bids are to be submitted on Wednesday, June 27th. Will be then opened, and hopefully we get some interest. So it is for the sale of 35 lots, minimum bid of $10,000 per lot.
I was concerned there would be a minimum price, because otherwise...
Yes, there has been minimum.
And we did open originally earlier for the owners in that area who had a lot adjacent to their house, that we gave them an opportunity, and there's at least one sold and one option sold, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah,
We're
so-
closing on the sale of that one lot Friday of this week.
So this has the potential of actually stimulating quite a bit of activity.
Some of it should be a fair amount of activity out there.
And as part of the bid package, yes, each developer is aware of the county 4-year tax abatement process.
Um,
So we'll take that there to discuss city issues.
Are there special assessments on those properties in addition to the purchase price, or there are no special assessments? Okay. Thank you.
Anything else to that? Jim?
I have a couple of things. First and foremost, most of you on the council are probably not aware of this, and our police force doesn't get enough credit when they deserve credit. But 2 Fridays ago, when we had the Marshall High School graduation, there was a perceived threat at that graduation. I don't know if you're aware of that, Steve. And the police handled it very well. There was, I noticed there's a bigger police presence there. And I just want to commend our police force. They were present there, but they weren't intrusive. So they didn't intrude on the ceremony of the children graduating, yet they were there to make sure that everybody was safe. And I want to commend our police force for that, the way they handled that, and it was very professional. And I don't think they get credit due sometimes when they do good things. And they did a very good job making sure that everything went off as it should go off. The other comment I want to make is Mr. Goodman gave the building department overview this year. And as I visit with builders, there's a positive flow in the building industry in Marshall. It's just, I don't know why, but there's a different vibe, there's a positivity, and I think that's good for Marshall. There's, with all these going up and the big addition of Menards, you got commercial. I believe there's a lot of houses started. There's more houses started now this spring than there was last year at this time. And it's just, there's a positive feel out in the community on that, and that's good. We get that positive feel, and the sale of your lots will be a lot easier, and that stimulates growth. And then the third thing is, and I'm looking forward to Jasmine DeSmith's report, but since I'm working in Ghent, she's not here tonight, but I go past the Marriage Center every day, and there seems to be a lot of activity there. There seems to be a lot of cars there. And I see people, is it Minnesota West using the track, and that's a good sign. I mean, just seeing cars there this year there's an increase of use. So, and I just happen to drive by every day, and it seems to be active just about every day. And I think that's a good sign, and I look forward to hearing your report on the use of the Marriage Center. So that's all I have tonight.
Just in addition on that, Jim, thanks for noticing that. There's actually scheduling conflicts out there now. That's a great problem to have.
Well, the detour, and I think the detour gives it a good visual, because you go right by and it's like there's a lot of cars. That's good to hear.
Just really one item, and put a thanks out there for Alex for his work on the sound system at the band shell, and made a much improvement on the sound. I wasn't able to be there last week, but I hope to be there this week. But apparently you can now hear things quite well out to the street, even if you're sitting in a car. So thanks to Alex for taking the time and apparently finding a problem in the system and resolving it. So.
Very good. Anything else?
That's it.
I have several things. First off, Sounds of Summer is coming up. I think, Glenn, maybe I've talked to you already, but there is a forthcoming request to use an additional parking lot. There's some expanded activities, so that gravel parking lot for a portion of the weekend on the Varsity Pub lot, there'll be a request for that. It has to do with like National Guard activity, climbing walls and things like that. So another good addition, I think. So that will be forthcoming. The over the past, I'll say week, but it's actually longer ago, there's been a lot of interaction with True Shrimp, with our economic development, myself, Glenn Olson's been involved, Sharon's been involved. So as they continue to, look at their opportunities for growth in Marshall at Commerce Park. So hopefully we have some, good news coming sooner than later on that, but it will come eventually on that. So just know there's, a statement was made at a previous council meeting that, that they're not expanding in Marshall. That is far from the truth, and they are very interested in I will call a very large development at Commerce Park. The last meeting we talked about Memorial Park, and previously in this meeting we talked about funding opportunities, our funding sources for the Historical Society Museum expansion, the match for that. I think Glenn, you brought up, are there other things that we should really be considering? In that consideration, I really think that foundational funding that would provide the foundation so that matches and contributions from private donors can happen for this final expansion of the memorial would be worthwhile inclusion in that discussion. And then finally, I'd say I've been in discussion with the chair of the county board. There's interest in having a future city council, county board and commission joint meeting. I think both Chair Paul Groupman and myself, though, really want to be sure that it's structured so that it is a productive conversation that's respectful. And so Paul and I are meeting tomorrow, and then hopefully after that can be looking at the coordination of some calendaring that we can have a joint meeting with the county board of commissioners. With that, that's all I have this evening. We'll move on then to agenda item number 22, which is city administrator report. Sharon.
Mr. Mayor and Councilman, just real briefly, even though it's been a slow progression, we do have on tentatively scheduled, and I haven't gotten the dates secured with Councilman D. Kramer and Vera Kohler, but a discussion in City Hall next week. I want to confirm it also with Glenn Olson. The architects just wants to have a small group discussion as kind of the next step. And obviously we have a lot of needs out there. Councilman Schaefer mentioned library building issues. I just want to point out that last week the second floor of City Hall was 90 degrees, and I killed a cockroach on Friday in my office, and so they're really quick moving. I'm glad I got them. I mean, but
Probably you're sweating from them.
yeah.
It's fleeing the second floor.
So anyway, makes you think a little bit. We're also going to have a preliminary planning session on merit to discuss the bonding dollars and next steps with that, and we'll include the Public Works Director with that discussion along with the Chief of Police. And then one other thing that's going to be upcoming, we're taking some initial steps with the long-term debt management study that the council approved several weeks ago, and some of the hesitancy or cautiousness on ad valorem taxes and special assessments, and it's not only because I'm a rookie, but I do think the long-term debt and reduction is a priority for the council based on last year's discussion, and that will have an impact on ad valorem taxes as well. But we'll be working closely with the finance department on some information sharing and some analysis on that. There's a draft audit for 2017, and we anticipate that being presented at the next council meeting. And then finally, as I stated in the closed session, thank you for the support of my performance in the position. I couldn't be here without you, so I do appreciate the positive feedback, the encouragement, and then also there was some constructive comments as well for areas to concentrate on and improve upon. So I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Glenn?
Just two items. The contractor is planning on starting on Saratoga Street a week from today. They'll be starting in the C Street area going south to Southview Drive, and then they'll be phasing of the rest of it. But the intent is to finish that section before school starts. That's always been the intent, but at the pre-job conference, that was reiterated. The school was at the meeting too, and so was Marshall Area Transit, which is something different now. But so that was discussed. Also, MnDOT sent a notice that MnDOT has a project statewide that's a fairly minor project cost, but they believe it will have a significant impact to the safety of the traveling public. And generally on state intersections with signals, they will be installing reflectorized tape around the outsides of each of the signal heads. So that will occur at Highway 59 and 23 and Highway 19 and 23 to bring those more to the attention of the drivers rather than just a black box with a light in it. It's really effective at night time. You can really see that a lot better. That's all I have.
Okay. Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Now that all of the big project paperwork has been approved for the upcoming apartment complex, we'll get on it and get all of these subsequent agreements put together. A couple weeks ago, I also mentioned some of the issues related to criminal prosecution and the amount of time my office staff has spent in court with criminal matters. I just took a look at our prosecutor's calendar today. There's 12 hearings today. Tuesdays are the days where if you're going to have a plea hearing or initial appearance or you request an evidentiary hearing, whatever, there's 12 hearings today. There's 14 next Tuesday. The following Tuesday is not yet scheduled, but there will be another 10 or 15 there. In addition to that, he has 4 jury trials and 2 court trials scheduled in the next 2 weeks as well. So the criminal prosecution side, it's kind of the quiet side. You don't see what's happening here, but it is very busy with our staff with that. So just to kind of put a few numbers on what's happening on the criminal prosecution in the city of Marshall through the city. Yeah, that's, as I said before, that's just limited jurisdiction, misdemeanor or petty misdemeanor crimes. That does not head up what's happening at the county level with the prosecution of felony level issues.
Thank you, Dennis. Agenda item number 25 is the pending agenda items. Any questions about the pending agenda items? Agenda item number 26 is the information items, including the building permits. And I would note in the summary of the building permit activity, that was, his note said as of the end of May, so there's sizable, including one for $2.7 million that is in addition to what Ilya's report had this evening. So a lot of activity going on. Agenda item number 27, the upcoming meetings, which brings us to agenda item number 28, to consider adjourning.
So move.
Motion by Craig. Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We're adjourned.